I'm Scott Starratt with Starratt Wealth Management, a part of Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management. So today, very happy to have the big wig on. So this is the Stuart Raftus is the president of Canaccord Genuity Wealth Management, as well as he holds a number of other senior roles within Canaccord Genuity at the corporate level. Been in the industry a long time. Stuart and I have known each other a long time, and we've know a lot of the same people within the industry. So I thought, well, it'd be great to have Stuart join us and chat a little bit about the industry, his background, and kind of it's been a year now since we made the move to Canaccord Genuity from Richardson, and I think at the end of this you'll see why we made the move, or one of the reasons. Don't want to put it all on him. One of the reasons. So boss, let's start. How did you get your start in the wealth management business? I mean, you've been doing this a long time, but how did you get started?
Okay, well, thanks, Scott, and good day, everyone. So, Scott, I started in the industry in Halifax, right out of university back in 1985, if you can imagine. So, started my career as a financial advisor. I guess that back at the time was called a financial consultant with Merrill Lynch, and remained in Halifax until '89, and moved to Toronto to get into the management side of the industry. And however many years later that is, here I am. So always been in wealth, both in Canada. Also spent a few years in New York. I worked with Merrill Lynch in New York. I also worked for CIBC Oppenheimer. I ran the Oppenheimer wealth business in the United States for a few years. And then I spent a little bit of time in the asset management side as well. But I think what I've most enjoyed is being on the wealth management side, both with the investment advisor part of the relationship and the client relationship, and trying to build a platform that in many ways is perfect for the investment advisor and their clients to achieve what they want. So it's all I've ever done, Scott, is worked in wealth management pretty well.
Yeah, that's good. So what, one of the things that I would say from before you took over was, Canaccord had a different kind of, I would say, reputation, on the street and with some clients and things like that. And I think you really completely shifted that narrative over the last 5, 6, 7 years. Can you talk a little bit about what the company was like as you were joining, and then what you did in order to kind of make the changes that we're starting to see right now?
Sure. Well, when I started, I felt that Canaccord Genuity was very well positioned in the Canadian marketplace to take advantage of what I thought was a void in the marketplace. And our industry in Canada is very much dominated by the banks, and the banks bought all these independent broker dealers back in the early '90s, and over time, they've really shifted the approach to wealth management during, over those many years. And the gap, I believe, was, the banks and some of the larger independents were really trying to commoditize the offering. In other words, offer very few solutions for advisors, and offer very, very few, offer very few solutions for their clients. And they're really trying to get advisors to fit into 2 or 3 boxes, and then as a result, really their clients are going to be forced to kind of fit into a very narrow range of investment opportunities. And so the idea was to create a platform, an offering that would be very customized for the individual advisor, and frankly be somewhat agnostic as to how an investment advisor runs their practice, as long as they're adding real value to the client relationship. So you can think at different ends of the spectrum, and each investment advisor seems to attract a certain type of clientele. It sort of mirrors in some ways maybe their own personality, or certainly how they run their individual practice. So at one end of the spectrum, you can have very, very conservative run practices where these are model portfolios, they're blue chip type portfolios. The relationship is built around financial planning and a very, deep due diligence, a deep dive due diligence, or discovery processes. I'm sorry, what's the word I was looking for? Really built around a discovery process, and from that, a portfolio is created, and long-term investment goals and objectives. So that's at one end of the spectrum. Another end of the spectrum, you have clients who want to participate in new issues. They want to participate in early stage companies, in early stage industry, for that matter. And they're looking more for wealth creation as opposed to perhaps wealth preservation or wealth diversification. And that's a completely different clientele often, and it's a completely different practice. Now, sometimes conservatively run practices also have people within them that they want to take 10%, 20% of their money and invest in these early stage companies. And I take some risk in their portfolio. But the point, Scott, where I'm going with this is, many of the banks, some of the larger independents, they really were pulling away from a more diverse style of investment advisor practice, and really just trying to commoditize the offering. So the idea was, if we could build a platform, build an offering for the most talented investment advisors in the industry, regardless of where they fit on that spectrum. And again, as long as they're adding real value to the clients. And what that ended up doing was fundamentally shifting, I believe, the perception of who Canaccord Genuity is in the marketplace. And it allowed us to be able to retain the best investment advisors that were already here, and then attract many, many investment advisors onto the platform. So, you asked when I joined, how has it changed? The platform at the time had roughly $8 billion of client assets on it. Today we're just under 34 billion. And we really have no more investment advisors today than we did then. And we had, for round number purposes, we had 150 investment advisors when we had $8 billion of client assets, and we basically have 150 investment advisors managing $34 billion in assets. And that's also fundamentally changed the profitability of the platform. This is a very profitable business, and I'm very pleased and proud to say it is a very profitable business, because what's important is when you're running a profitable business, you can reinvest in that business. And we can reinvest in technologies that support the client. We can invest in technologies that support the investment advisor. And that's different necessarily than some of these platforms at other firms, where they're really just now trying to squeeze as much out of the business as they possibly can. They're mature businesses. The wealth management business, particularly at the banks, it's as big as it's getting, right? So they're just in profit maximization mode, probably at the expense of either the investment advisor environment or the client environment, or both. And we're in growth mode. We're in rapid growth mode, and quite excited about how much things have changed over the last 5 or 6 years, and frankly, what the next 5 or 6 years look like. They look as exciting as the last few have.
Yeah. Now, you really alluded to the we'll call it the big bad banks. I mean, it's not really bank bashing. It's just the reality is they have, what is the number, like 80% of Canadian wealth now, or something like that, is it?
Scott, I think it's north of 90.
Oh, is it that high now? Wow, crazy.
Yeah.
So you had that, but the reality is, the elephant in the room, so to speak, is the big Canadian bank. But what is the role for the independent? I mean, as you said, you kind of have the ability to offer differentiated products, not putting clients or advisors in silos and forcing them to do a certain type of business that may or may not be client worthwhile for that client. But where do you see the independent landscape and when you're trying to compete with entities that control over 90% of the Canadian wealth?
Well, yeah, so there's a lot in that. It's an excellent question, and I think there's great opportunity, and there's a lot of room for independence in Canada, and it, I like the competition. I like to see competition on the independent side, because I think it's very good for the client. So look, the banks are an oligopoly. There's just no two ways about that, and with that comes certain challenges, and sort of minimizes what is required to be offered to the end user, being the client. Now, I'm not bank bashing at all. I mean, quite frankly, I understand their business plan, and if I'm there running a bank, I'm probably doing the exact same thing they're doing. And for many clients, I'm sure it's fine. But if someone's looking for a more customized approach to their individual needs, it's difficult to attain that at a bank where they're trying to commoditize the offering. So the role of the independent, I think, is really to fill those gaps. And I think of the banks as sort of a big box store, where you can get a lot of what you need. Maybe you get more, it comes in a bigger box, and the environment in which you shop in is not all that great, but you can get most of what you need there, versus a boutique, where boutiques have popped up in lots of different types of retail offerings, because people are looking for a more customized, bespoke experience in dealing with that environment. Now, the difference in when I raise that with the big box store and boutiques, usually with a boutique, you end up paying more, which what's interesting in financial services, really what you're paying at a bank or what you're paying at an independent for advice, it's pretty well the same. It's a highly competitive environment. So, the room for the independent in Canada is that you get this more customized, bespoke offering, sort of this boutique offering, but frankly, at the same or relatively the same pricing that you're going to get at a bank. And so, the banks aren't going away. The banks are going to continue to be highly effective in wealth management. But, the independents play, I think, a very important role to just create, to offer a difference, to offer a differentiated level of product and service than you're going to get at a bank. And if you think about what's happened since the 90s, there used to be lots of independents in Canada. Then most of them have disappeared. Either they were bought by the banks or they've merged into other independents, but there are very few sizable independents today. And that's why I'm so, such a strong believer in making sure that, there is at least one very strong independent, Canaccord Genuity, but, that there will be others, that there will be other strong independents out there, just to give clients differentiation, different options other than just dealing with the banks.
Yeah. And as a matter of fact, having a strong independent, I've always been a believer that having strong independents out there, whether, whether it's Richardson's or Wellington or whoever, is out there in the marketplace is really good for everyone, because it provides that friction, right? That is needed. And we see what happens with maybe a company like Amazon. Not that they're bad. I mean, shoot, I use Amazon, a few times a month, but you get a certain product, and sometimes that's not always good. Sometimes it is. Depends on what you're looking for, right?
Agreed.
So one of the things, just to shift a little bit, one of your responsibilities on the wealth management side, as well as for the global entity, is the United Kingdom and Australia. How much has your life changed since the global pandemic, when you aren't on a plane 24/7 going to Australia or UK or across Canada?
Well, it's changed a lot. I certainly get to spend a lot more time with my wife and the 4 boys. That's for sure. And but meetings like this, Zoom meetings, it's remarkable. This is technology that's been available for many years. We just didn't seem to take advantage of it for whatever reason. And I think about our global opco, which meets every Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. It's always just been done by telephone. And for some reason, when this happened, we all got on a Zoom call, and the meetings are just much more productive, seeing people face to face, than they are just having an old-fashioned conference call. But I'd be down in Australia 4 times a year. I'd probably be over in the UK 3, maybe 4 times a year. You can accomplish a lot. Now I have a standing Zoom meeting with the team in Australia Tuesday evenings. I think it's at 7 p.m. or 7:30 p.m.
Okay.
Toronto time.
Oh, that's not bad.
And no, it's not bad at all. Similar with the UK. But there's no replacement for no substitute for meeting people in person. I think that this medium of communication is good. It's actually very good. But meeting people, face to face, sharing a lunch with them or sharing a dinner with them or a cup of coffee, whatever it is, and just building a relationship, I think really helps. You've been here, long enough now to see that the culture of the firm is just so critically important to how we do things, and how people collaborate in their own local office, let alone nationally, let alone from the US to Australia to the UK, and all the benefits that come out of that. And sometimes they come out of it in the most unforeseen area, something that you weren't necessarily planning on, but because the relationships exist, because the open communication exists, it really allows you to leverage that global footprint that we have, and take advantage of that. So, on some areas, it's nice not to be traveling as much, but there's no question. I've enjoyed that. I enjoyed the relationship side of the business, and I'm looking forward to being back in Australia and back in the UK.
Yeah, cool. So just off that, and the last kind of area I want to explore is because of, I would argue a great deal of expertise, probably on the financial services side for the UK and for Australia, probably one of the most senior wealth management executives that have the knowledge of those two areas in Canada. How, the regulatory environment over there is completely different than ours. Based on what you see in Australia, and in particular the UK, where do you see wealth management in Canada going? Are we going to go towards more of the UK model for things, or is it still going to be more kind of US based? With the changes that may or may not be coming over the next few years. What's your kind of perception of that?
Well, Scott, you put it very well. They are quite different regulatory environments in the UK versus the US versus Australia versus Canada. But then, there are a lot of similarities. And there's been great reforms, I think, in all countries. And transparency to clients is much greater today than what I would have started in 1985. The reliance of, the insistence of client interests first. So I think a lot of really good things have come out of the change in regulation. So the regulator also creates a different business environment, and the business in the UK is quite different than the business in Canada. The business in Canada and Australia are very similar in a lot of ways. They're the advisor client relationship is very similar, Canada to Australia. In the UK, the investment process, it's more of a centralized investment process where clients get effectively the same type of portfolios. Now, there are a number of them, but they're all very similar. And depending on the net worth and the sophistication of the clients, you can kind of color outside the edges somewhat. Whereas in Canada, and somewhat in Australia, and certainly in the US, client portfolios can be much more bespoke. They can be much more customized precisely, and they often look completely different from one client to the next because the long-term goals and objectives of those clients. So, I think we're going to continue to see more regulation. There's been some very heavy regulation, educational requirements that have come into Australia that have really changed the industry quite dramatically, primarily for the investment advisor, not so much for the client. I think regulation continues to increase in our business. It's always been a very highly regulated industry anyway. It's not like it's coming from a really low base, but there's increased regulation all the time. And from where I sit, most of it, if not all that I've seen, has been in the best interest of the client. And it costs us, costs the industry a lot of money to bring in the technologies required to adhere to these regulations. But I welcome them, and I think that they're really good news for the clients and good news for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, when I started, because I started, I think, 94, and back then, and really for the first, I would say, almost 15 years anyway, you would never call the compliance department. That would be, oh no, you don't want to talk to them. They're the dark side. You don't want to talk to them. And now over time, that's changed where they're truly partners. So if there's something that's a little bit different, maybe in our case, we would have maybe an older client who may need some help and maybe taken advantage of, or obviously money laundering is always a big, with terrorism and stuff, is a big issue. We would go for them for advice, and all of a sudden, I don't think, now correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think they're keeping a little black book with names of how many times I've called and what I've called about and stuff. But they're really truly partners, right? And I think that's a big difference than before. And I think that it does is it fosters the better advisor, because the advisor is definitely looking out for their client needs and how to deal with certain very complex situations sometimes, especially with seniors.
Yes.
Very, very complex, right? So
totally agree.
Yeah. So, well, that's all the time we have today. Let's stop it there. I want to just say thank you very much for joining us, and for everybody listening. Starratt Wealth Management specializes in helping successful families transition through life. So, if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to any one of us on the team. Thank you again.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everyone.